On the Eurostar, I just won and was starting to work with new projects around the IMI fund and various other mechanisms which Europe have quite big pots of money that they plumb into research. I was starting to think, what would the 2024 IMI 3 period start looking like? What would be the kind of research money that how could one distribute that, and those kinds of questions. And they all seemed really premised on this concept that we would get sick, that we would be failing in body, in mind, in other things. And I was like, hang on a second. With all this new digitization, with this amazing new world of technology that's coming our way, maybe that's not the correct assumption. What if we lived forever? So I got off the train, I put on my warm coat, I met my sister in the bar. I got there early. I'm early for everything, unfortunately. And started having my beer and pondering this question. My sister arrived, and I looked her in the eye and just threw out the question, do you want to live forever? Her reaction took me completely by surprise. She freaked out. For about 2 hours, I had her telling me hundreds of reasons why living forever was a terrible idea and would bring the end of all things. And sort of after 2 or 3 pints, my sort of hair was back with this verbal attack which she'd thrown at me. But it got me thinking that that's something really interesting. My sister's a pretty chilled out girl, and this had totally freaked her out. So about 2 years ago, I decided to start having this conversation with people. And I've been asking loads and loads and loads of people, do you want to live forever? So I'm going to ask this to you guys today. I'm going to spend a little bit of time giving you just a little bit more context. And then what I'm going to do is spend the most of my time talking about what might the consequences of immortality be. I'm going to do some online and live voting. So please have all your phones out. We'll see if the technology gods are with us, because I want to get your views on this. I want to engage you. But first, a little bit more context. There's probably 3 ways to get to immortality. Number 1, I call the Dracula Scenario. Here's our wonderful Bram Stoker and his interpretation of Dracula. The Dracula Scenario sees humanity regenerate somehow, regenerate organs in some kind of interesting stem cell-like way, one suspects. Scenario 2 is what I call the HAL 9000 scenario. That's when you take your brain and basically download a copy of it into a computer of some description. And then scenario 3 is the ghost in the shell scenario, if the clicker thing works. And that would see human organs slowly replaced over time with mechanical ones. Now, I'm not saying that one or the other is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. But what I do believe is that in the next 50 years, one of these things could be reality. So what I want to do is I want to just throw the question out to you, is do you want to live forever? So all you need to do is you need to take your phone, jump online, go to www.menti.com. You have a code there. It'll ask you to just plumb in 353333 and tell me what you think. Do you want to live forever? And you can choose whatever rules you want. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the Dracula scenario or if you're thinking about the different other scenarios. But tell me, do you want to live forever? Wow, you're like my sister. Wow. Okay. So I've got some skeptics. Exciting. All right. Some more yeses would be good. So I'm gonna give you a couple of ideas and some concepts of why I think that they're so heavily in the no camp. I think it's sort of what I was expecting. And one of my propositions that I'm going to put to you today is if I was giving this same talk in the East, in China, for example, I reckon that those things would flip. And I'm going to try and explain why I think that's the case. But first, I need to convince you that I'm not absolutely, totally crazy. So, 7643, fantastic. It is a reality. And it is something that we're going to have to start looking at and facing in the coming years. I'm going to give you 3 really quick examples. Regeneration. So I hope no one's particularly contemplating in our Dracula scenario sucking blood, but that is a mouse with an ear on it. In the last few months, some scientists in Japan have managed to grow, using stem cells and embryos from mice, a kidney. Tiny one, not a big one, but that's just a problem of size. So regeneration is coming our way. It's happening today. Number 2, download. Our friend Elon has raised 39 million for his Neuralink program. Now, its express aim is to sort of connect brains and machines so that they can kind of talk to each other. I think what Elon's really hoping is that he can download his brain into one of those things and continue to live and drive his Tesla forever. But it's here. The investment community gave 39 million to this absolutely insane ambition. Number 3, cybernetics, our ghost in the machine scenario. There in the number 3 is the artificial pancreas by a company called Medtronic. That, in the last few weeks, has been approved for type 1 diabetics in America. That is a machine pretending to be a pancreas. It's a fully closed-loop system. It measures your HbA1c level and feeds back a system, an algorithm, and injects insulin remotely. You never need to worry about it. That is an artificial organ. Now, sure, pancreas, reasonably simple compared to a heart or a lung, but it's here. My point is that we're all sitting here, and you might have looked at the talk and gone, immortality, crazy topic. But in reality, it is here. Those are 3 examples of it happening. I'm going to focus now very quickly on some of the consequences. If we look at regeneration, this is, for me at least, one of the bits I'm probably more skeptical of, and I think possibly why a lot of people were saying no, because I think this is what's in your mind, this Dracula-like scenario. What are some of the consequences? What are some of the policy problems that one would be thrown up if we had regenerative technology which kept us alive for a very long time? It could embed everlasting inequality. Imagine Rupert Murdoch raining misinformation down on planet Earth for the next decade. That would be awful. I think we can agree religious turmoil would probably ensue. Regardless of your views on religion, it is a fundamental bedrock of culture and society. And that is so deeply tied to the concept of death, be that through reincarnation or everlasting life or whatever it is. And that would be fundamentally challenged. Now, on the positive side, if we were regenerating, one would hope that it would give us a bit more longer-term thinking. I look at issues like climate change, in which we're doing a crap job on at the moment, and one would hope if you were going to stick around for a few more 100 years, we might do a little bit better. Some of the consequences then of download. So this one, for me, is the most unknowable. There's an interesting theory about what's called the hard problem. So the hard problem is if you reject the concept of duality, that our spirit's somewhere out there in the ether, it's part of like my me-ness is part of me. Where is it? How can we measure it? And psychologists and neuroscience are struggling with this at the moment. One theory, which I happen to agree with at the moment, is that the self, this conscious being, is obviously very complex. But it's actually a function of the internal mapping of your system. So the internal organ structure is actually mapped very clearly in the brain. And that is matched with what would be sort of the input-output of the environment, which is then also matched with what would be called the autobiographical self, so what your hopes and fears are. And bundle all that together, and you get yourself, you get consciousness, which isn't discretely measurable, but it's there. Problem with download is you take all that away. Imagine how different we would be if we didn't need to breathe. Imagine how many different choices we would make if we didn't have to eat 3 times a day. Imagine what the whole male population would be like without a sex drive. And these are totally, totally unpredictable consequences, but potentially quite exciting. If we look back at history, human beings haven't got a great track record. We're pretty warlike. We're slavish to these baser desires. And again, on climate change, we're not doing a great job on this. So maybe there is opportunity there, but it's incredibly difficult to look at and find and see. The third thing then, which I want to touch on, is the consequences from the final Ghost in the Shell scenario, which in my view is probably the most optimistic. You would have sort of phased immortality. So it's not as if suddenly one day you're normal, then suddenly you're a computer. You would actually sort of, your kidneys fail, you get new kidneys. Your heart starts to go, you get a new heart. And linked to that, this wonderful, beautiful human curiosity and desire to upgrade would start to play. Now, make no mistake, in each of the 3 scenarios, it's the end of evolution. You mean, Darwinian natural selection doesn't exist anymore, so something else takes its place. And as we upgrade, there's wonderful new opportunities that might present themselves. Yesterday at the Summit Awards, there was so much talk about space exploration. That's how we get there. The final thing is the risk, the consequences of cybernetics. Imagine if Spotify owned your ear organs. That would be a bit scary. Might be a few conflicts of interest there. Or another company owned your heart and another your lungs. Would there be a subscription fee? But those are pretty big questions, and no one's talking about them. But they're here. The FDA has approved a functional mechanical organ today. Last point before we're going to vote again, and we're going to see if I've changed anyone's minds, which I probably haven't. Why did you all vote this way? I think there's a really, really, really big pitfall here. And that is that in the Western world, the deep religious underlying cultural trends has at its core the concept that death gives life meaning. That's what my sister kept telling me again and again. You will have no meaning if you live forever. That's echoed by great philosophers like Simone de Beauvoir, who writes a wonderful book called All Men Are Mortal, which all men should read. And again, it says death gives life meaning. Without death, there is no meaning in life. And what I was actually doing when I was asking my sister that question at the beginning was I was challenging the meaning of her life, how she defined her existence. And that freaked her out. And I promise you, I've had this conversation now with probably hundreds of people. At least 30% of them freak out at me. In fact, in the taxi here yesterday, the lovely guy I was chatting to, I was like, do you want to live forever? He's like, no, that's a crazy idea. That's okay, but it's coming. We're going to have to face these questions. Because the East have a completely different view. That's the Terracotta Army and the first Chinese emperor. The first Chinese emperor built a whole army of stone soldiers because he was going to live forever and he needed them to go take over some stuff. Confucianism believes in reincarnation. They are totally comfortable with the concept of immortality. So if you look at policy goals and you look at some of the challenges which I've tried to outline today, you're going to see a very big break in global attitudes towards this. The East are going to go after it, and the West, perhaps, are going to run away. And I don't think that's necessary. I think they both should go for it. So, I'm going to ask you again. This time, it's a slight different question. The question is, should humanity embark on an immortality project? And then I'm going to give you a 2-minute view. We're equal at the beginning. So same again, menti.com, 353333. I'm obviously more persuasive than I thought. Hurrah, 10 points for me. So I think it's here. I think we're going to have to really start addressing these conversations in a really meaningful way. My last point is just a call, a watch out, as it were. It's fascinating. I think that there should be 3 rules that we talk and think about when we think about an immortality project. I agree with the majority that we should do one. I don't think a private entity should have it. I don't think Spotify should own our ears. I don't think a single nation state should do it. It's too much power to have in what is a closed ecosystem. And I think we should aim for cybernetics, because I think that's the most interesting way to progress humanity, both philosophically and physically. And my call is, if I think about that bundle of money that the European project puts towards health and well-being, is, sure, of course, we want to have the amazing new medicines that are coming out of the pharmaceutical world. We want to have a bit more focus on technology, I hope. But wouldn't it be amazing to ring-fence a bit of that 3.6 billion that we spend every 10 years on healthcare at European level, and go for a moonshot and start not only talking about this concept of immortality, but perhaps trying to get there. Thank you.